You had me at cello, cello. You had me at cello. You had me at cello. Oh, you had me at cello. Playing the cello has...
Hi, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday, time for Cello Chat. Very excited this week to have with me Tido Janssen. Tido is the cello professor at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. How are you doing, Professor Janssen?
Really good. Thank you very much for inviting me and talk to you.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Thanks for being my guest. So can you start by telling the viewers about your musical background?
Sure. As you said, I'm now at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, which is like a UT system university with like around 30,000 students. And we are like in the way south tip of Texas, very close to the Mexican border. So our student population is like 90% almost Hispanic. And I've been here for 11 years. And if you would have asked me where I would be when I grew up, I would have never imagined where I ended up, not at all. I was born and grew up in Germany in like a pretty remote area, which reminds me a lot of where I am right now. It's like very close to the coast and flat land, and islands out on the coast, and with like a distinct little culture separate from the rest of the country, its own language, and sometimes I think that's why I feel kind of at home here, or I can relate to people here, because we grew up under similar circumstances. Where I grew up, even though it was like very remote in a small town, I had like, I think I'm lucky that I had like great opportunities. My parents, they were not musicians, but they were like amateurs, both playing piano and a little bit. And all of my siblings, we were 4, we were playing instruments growing up. And I had some really good cello teachers in the beginning. One Hungarian immigrant who came from Budapest and had like a training in Hungary, and was like very supportive from me very early on. We had a good youth orchestra and a great summer festival, and I think that's mostly why I ended up in music, being surrounded by people who were passionate about playing, other students, and then meeting at the summer festival in our remote area, really great artists, and having one violin teacher in particular who organized this festival, always Wolfram König, who brought in guests, including Neikrug one year, George Neikrug, who I ended up studying many years later with, and that was not on my radar at all, and not even when he was there, I was thinking about ending up studying with him. And also I heard like lots of really great concerts in like these very small halls that fit maybe 300 people, and churches. I heard Pierre Fournier accompanied by his son, Rostropowitsch came. At one point he played piano accompanying his wife, singing, and I heard Yo-Yo Ma, who put his cello in my hand, and once he figured out that I played cello too, and like Anna-Sophie Mutter, Yehuda Menuhin, like lots of really incredibly big names that came into this very small rural area where I grew up. And I'm just telling you that because that's kind of inspires me still today to do what I'm doing where I am right now. I ended up first I didn't study music, I ended up studying science, but always playing cello pretty seriously, and then getting frustrated how much worse I got over the years instead of getting better, or how hard it was to progress if you are not really focusing on it fully, So I decided to give it a shot and see if I could just devote my whole time to getting better at the cello and see how far I can go. I ended up also lucky again. I was accepted into a cello studio by Jürgen Wolf, who was a principal cellist of the Düsseldorf Symphony Orchestra. He was a great teacher for me, very supportive and then I started participating in more festivals. Again, once I got really serious about music in Germany, and I went to Austria and to Italy twice, and I went twice to Spain for a festival where, through a connection of my sister who was a violist and who lived in Spain at the time, I went to a summer festival in Cervera, Spain, where Marcel Cervera was teaching. He's a gentleman who just passed away a few years ago, a great Spanish cellist who was teaching all over Europe and including in Germany. But that was a great, very intimate festival too. And I took classes with him, like master classes and lessons. But I met there an American cellist, Richard Tarkovsky, who was playing in the Barcelona Symphony Orchestra. And he was just so supportive and gave me like sometimes 2-3 hour lessons throughout this festival. Whenever I wanted and play for him, he was willing to share everything he knew and really pushing me. And then once I left home, I just wanted to study more with him because I learned so much from him. He didn't teach anywhere. And at the time when I decided that I wanted to get more lessons with him, he actually moved to Iceland. He became the principal cellist of the Iceland Symphony Orchestra for a while, or the acting principal. And he ended up living in Iceland for 20 years. And I went to visit him there for 2 months to study with him. And that was a great experience. And he then ended up, because he was not affiliated with any institution where I could really study formally or get a degree, he ended up sending me to his teacher, which was George Neikrug at Boston University. And that's how I ended up in the United States, basically. I got my master's there. I met my wife at Boston University, and she is a pianist Stacy Kwok, and we have been playing together ever since. We're doing a lot of recitals and chamber music together. And we both ended up getting our doctorate in Texas, and that's how I ended up in Texas. I went to the University of North Texas, studied with Carter Enyeart and Walter Gray for 1 year, who was the first cellist of the Corners Quartet, who was really great and like a great influence for me, because at that point I have been in school for hundreds of years, as it felt, but he was so enthusiastic about old music, about new music, about anything really, and that kind of sparked a kind of new excitement about playing and learning and being open to learning anything from me. And my last teacher there was Eugene Osadchy, a Ukrainian cellist who came from Canada, who was a great artist too. I started then auditioning and applying for jobs. And the first job was at a small college in West Texas, in Abilene, Texas. A very small university, but with a great music program, maybe the oldest music program in the state of Texas. And stayed there for a bunch of years, started organizing orchestra festivals in the summer for young kids from middle school to high school. Went to Canada, lived in Alberta for 4 years to teach in Lethbridge at the Lethbridge University, and that's where I started my first cello festival. And then was invited to come to apply for the job where I'm right now in Edinburgh, Texas, at University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, where I've been ever since. And what I started in Canada, these cello festivals, I've done that pretty much every year here. And that's that kind of complete the circle, because these festivals and these events were, and meeting these great artists was so inspirational to me. That's why I'm organizing that basically for not only my students, who I always hope will make a connection to some cellist from out of town to maybe go to graduate school or just get new ideas. And for myself too, just to get inspired, to hear new ideas about teaching, about playing. And then, but also inspire the other students and other teachers here in town by giving them a chance to meet other great people, mostly, not just cellists, but often the atmospheres of the cello festival are just such positive atmosphere, this collaboration, and everybody really liking playing together and working together. That's, I think, what makes it so rewarding to do.
Very true. Well, now, so you are good at making connections and finding opportunities. You must keep your eyes open, keep your ear to the ground. Everything from finding those various festivals that you described in Europe when you were younger to then you also have connections where you also teach, I should say, in New Hampshire and Tennessee. And do you have, for the young people watching, some advice as far as just kind of this awareness and willingness to look for new opportunities like that?
like it's always, every time I meet people, it's so surprising, and I'm sure you have been going through that many, many times, how small the music world is. Like if I meet somebody new, almost always there's like a very close connection to somebody, like between us, that you have like a common teacher, or you are very close friends with somebody who shares a teacher, you have been to the same festivals, you have played with the same people. There's always like a surprisingly close connection between all musicians. And these connections you make at college first, like where you often meet people that you stay friends with for the rest of your life. And then also at these festivals, you meet people that you often end up playing with for the rest of your life, or you end up at least being connected through the rest of your life. You send them students, they may send you students, and you are asking them for advice. I think it's like so. That's really why I like being in music. It's like meeting people. And what I also find kind of interesting is that always the best musicians, or the people that I aspire to the most and that I admire the most, are also always really great people. Like interesting people and supportive people and positive people. You rarely meet somebody I rarely meet somebody who I think is like an amazing artist, but they're also really mean or terrible people. It happens, but I hear more about it than I actually experience it. I haven't really experienced it that much.
Yeah, that's so true. But now, is there a degree to which, there are some people who, even if they meet people and there are these connections and opportunities, they kind of don't act on it. I think you must have a fair amount of initiative to think, oh, I like these connections and I like finding ways to interact further, so that you stay proactive in this manner.
Yeah, it's probably because I had that experience, that's why I go after it more and more. And I do try to push my students very hard to do that, the same thing, and try to get the same experience. But it is difficult to convince students to go out of your comfort zone and go, I don't know, like to across the country, somewhere completely different, where you have no idea how you would hold up against others, maybe, I think it's like fear of competition, perhaps, but also like fear of being away and not quite knowing what to do. Often, where we live here, a lot of students don't have a lot of experience traveling far. Like we are very remote and kind of like a little closed and very closed family-oriented culture. But I do try very hard to push, and I'm not as successful as I want to be, really. I really would like all of them to go out every summer and do something. And it's not only fear; it's also finances, of course. It's expensive to travel. Sometimes these festivals are very expensive, but our university has been really good at supporting students who are interested in going and who got accepted somewhere. Especially if you get accepted somewhere and you win a little scholarship, that opens a lot of doors for more funding, and I'm always happy to try to help them to find more funding. And actually, as far as I know, I think everybody who ever went basically had everything covered,
Wow.
so that they didn't have to do too much out of their own pocket.
Wonderful. All right. Now, one of the main running themes through this series of interviews is motivating students to play, to practice. I think sometimes students may love the cello this much, but until they find a way to also love practicing or to get in the habit of practicing or whatever it is, of course, we're all different and it's going to be at least somewhat different for different people. But we also know that so many of these students, when they do find a way to get in the habit of regular practice, they love how much they advance. Like what you said, when you're in the sciences, you weren't able to devote as much time as you wanted to advance at the rate that you wanted. And it's fun to advance. So what are some of the things that you do to help your students really get the cello out every opportunity and just keep playing and keep advancing?
I haven't found the holy grail for that, and I'm constantly searching for new ideas. I do think that it is maybe the hardest thing for new cellists is to make practicing a habit, like to actually start getting into it, that it becomes something that you need to do. I always tell my students is like need to do like brushing your teeth. You just don't feel good if you didn't do it, And so, building up, getting to that point is quite a bit of work. But once you get there, it is actually amazing how helpful that is if you have the habit of practicing that you just want to do, even if you just want to do a little bit, because once you start doing it, often you kind of get stuck and glued onto the chair, and then you solve the problem until you're done. And you probably know that too. Often the hardest part is to just unpack your cello and sit down and start. And once you start, after 5 or 10 minutes, you're just into it, and you kind of just roll with the work that's in front of you on the stand. But developing that habit, I found it difficult, and I've been always struggling with my students, and some really get it and want it, and they make a lot of progress, and the ones that resist get frustrated, and then it's like this downward. It's either an upward spiral or a downward spiral. You don't work, so you're frustrated that you don't sound as good or you don't learn as fast as you want to, and then because of that, you don't want to work at it. And on the other hand, if you work hard even on the stuff that you don't want to do, suddenly you realize you're making progress, and then you want to do more of it. And I know I can relate very well, because I remember vividly that I really didn't like practicing scales, and I didn't know what the point was, and it took me so long to get that. But once I really felt the benefit for myself, I never really stopped working on basic stuff like every time I practice, just because it makes me feel so much better on the cello, and then I learn music so much faster. But helping my students to have that experience for themselves so that they then develop that habit for themselves, that's always a struggle. And I talk to my students every semester. We're trying new things, like having to submit, like the thing that I've done for the last couple of years. I require them to submit videos of their technique work, and some do, some don't do it at all, and or very little. And I'm still not really sure how to make them really do it. But every semester at the end, we talk about how I can make that better for them, that they do, that it inspires them, or at least makes them willing to do it. What it is that would click for them to want to do the work, And I see, but there are two. I think what seems to work the most is like the community of cellists that you have around you. If there's a few students who do it, and that help build up a positive studio atmosphere, that helps a lot, and then everybody wants to do it. If they, some positive leaders in the group are making good progress and supporting each other, the older students, and supporting the younger ones, then something happens.
Yeah, and sometimes, something like a summer cello festival can be fuel can inspire somebody for weeks and months.
Definitely.
Tell a bit more, if you would, about your cello festival.
I mean, the cello festival is just a weekend event. We always do it like in like in the middle of spring, end of March, early April. And I invite cellists from, at least one or two cellists from further away, usually people that I either I know myself or I have been heard about, that are like dedicated teachers, good performers, but also people who love teaching and sharing their ideas, to go along the lines of just creating like a positive atmosphere for learning and wanting to learn. And then I always hope that becomes an inspiring event. And it often is, I can feel the difference that after the festival, even though it's a lot of hard work to push people to get ready for it, to perform for master classes, then just the pressure of having to perform, I think, is a great inspiration, for myself too. If I don't have to perform, it's a little harder to make yourself practice. But if you know you have to do something, you just have to do it. And I hope that works for my students too. And I've had really great clinicians. This year we had Bonnie Hampton, who is a great iconic teacher. She's in her 80s now. She was supposed to come in person, but ended up just doing classes online, which was really still very interesting, and a very interesting person to talk to and hear her stories. She has, because of that connection in the music world, had a lot of stories to tell about music in general and people that she met and how she met them. And we had Julian Schwartz, who was at Shenandoah College, also amazing cellist and musician and clinician, worked really hard, and that just was a joy to be around. And Mike Block, who is a more adventurous cellist. He's playing standing up and playing a lot of non-traditional music. I always like my students to see that too, because when I grew up, that was discouraged. I was discouraged from improvising and doing something. Oh, go practice real stuff. Don't fiddle around, and that has changed so much. And I wish that I would have grown up, and that's maybe my weakness. I always wish that I would be better at improvising or more courageous at going into that direction. But a lot of my students do, and because a lot of younger cellists now, it's almost expected that you're much more open-minded and much more broadly educated in what kind of styles of music you play. It's hard, I think, or harder to survive in the music world unless you're on the way top to only play classical music and make your living as a performer. You will be a performer, a teacher, an organizer, an entrepreneur, and a writer, perhaps, and recording. And so there's lots of different things that you can do in the music field, and it's good to be open-minded and learn a lot about other things.
Very true. Very true.
So these festivals, that's what they're about to show. Not only my students, but maybe all the cellists here, and we have a lot of cellists. Usually. Last year was a little small because we had an only online festival. We had Santiago Canyon Valencia doing a masterclass online and a meet and greet online. That was really interesting too. He was also very, really fun to talk to. And I was amazed how patient he was with questions from very young students, and we had really interesting questions also from young and from middle school up to high school and college students, really interesting questions, and he was willing to answer them all at great depth and length. And but usually at these festivals we have between 150. This year was also fairly small, 150. Usually it's between 150 and 200, sometimes a little over 200 cellists from our area here around, maybe between 50 and 100 miles surrounding area, including Mexico.
Great, that's wonderful. Now in terms of the idea of wearing lots of hats within the cello world, which is wonderful and fun, what drew you initially to chamber music? I did hear samples of your CD, for example, with Centaur Records of the Rheinberger Trio, and you have a very beautiful, warm sound, I must say.
Oh, thank you. It's just. I always love playing chamber music, because it's a little bit more intimate setting where you are really getting to know single players, and also have more opportunity to be creative in your playing, and the collaborative process of preparing something, that's perhaps one of the most rewarding things about playing music, at least for me. I love playing an orchestra too, because there you play repertoire that you can with 100 other people, that you make so much noise and so powerful and emotionally impactful music that you cannot do by yourself. But chamber music can be rewarding in its own way, just because you have more personal input into what comes out, what the outcome is of that, And every summer I go to New Hampshire for the New Hampshire Music Festival, which was just a performing festival. It's orchestra and chamber music performances. and playing with musicians from all over the country. And there are a lot of musicians who have been going to that festival for 20, 30, some 40 years. And so they are very experienced performers often, and it's wonderful to play with people like that. Often people who have perhaps played the piece before me once or twice or three times, but I've never played it. And so it's often a combination of people who are new to the repertoire, people who have played it once, who have played it many times, and then everybody sharing all their experience and the knowledge of the piece already. That's often very interesting and rewarding chamber music making.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. Wonderful. Now, so the festival has come and gone for this year. What are some of your other upcoming performances or other projects for 2022?
Right now we are making plans for the summer in New Hampshire. It's a 4-week festival, so there are all the chamber music, the orchestra music is all set. That's decided by the music director. But right now, all the musicians talk about amongst themselves, and with a coordinator, also somebody who was kind of elected by the musicians or put forward by the musicians to help organize a chamber music series that's organized by the musicians, and deciding what everybody wants to play and find people who want to play it with you, or you ask people that you want to play something particular with. And that's always a really interesting process because it's all musicians organizing this. There's a lot of interesting repertoire being played. Sometimes really the great classics that everybody wants to play, and also a lot of people want to hear, but also a lot of very unusual repertoire, like forgotten composers of the past, a lot of minority composers, female composers, a lot of contemporary composers. So that, and then the programs become very interesting because it's such a mixture of repertoire, and the audience there loves it. So that's it's one of my favorite things to do in the year. Having the beginning of the summer to practice, get myself really back into shape, and then performing with great people, unusual repertoire.
Nice. That sounds really fun. All right. And for the fall?
For the fall, we haven't really, we are just talking about that. Like my wife and I, we always play a recital. Last year we played a recital with all American music and almost all contemporary music except for one piece by living composers. And I'm not quite sure, we are not still discussing and deciding what we want to do for next year, what we want to play. And also with our colleagues here, what to do for chamber music. That's like now is usually the time where we plan things for the following season.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's time to get serious.
Excellent. There's always something to be focused on, serious about. All right. Well, Tido Janssen, thank you so much. This has been a real treat having you on, and very interesting ideas from everybody. It's really great to hear everybody's enthusiasm for music in this wonderful world of cello that we are into, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And I meant to actually listen to some more because I saw some of the names of the people that you have talked to before. And I saw Kawa Yu, who has been at my cello festival a couple of years, and I went to his cello festival. He was here at the online festival, unfortunately, when it just everything shut down for COVID. I have to have him back in person once. Yeah, I see you talk to a lot of people.
It's been fun. It's and like what you say. I mean, on the one hand, if a youngster looks at the list of cello players out there, of course, it seems interminable. But once you start doing the 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of separation, it is a much smaller world then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I always tell my students that's why it's good to be nice too, because and to be like to be supportive of each other, because people remember if you are fun to work with, if you like cooperating with people. It's not just about being a good player. It's important to be a good player, but it's also good to be a good cooperator. Being interested in supporting other people and their ideas and their endeavors.
Yes, yes, within the world of music and without.
Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you again. And to the viewers, happy practicing all weekend, and we'll see you this time next Friday. Take care.
Good luck, everyone.